Welcome back to another episode of Inside Multifamily Access Control, sponsored by Salto. Very excited to have the team back together again. Colin, how you doing?
Doing well. Hello.
Absolutely. So coming off pretty, I think, a pretty great interview with the CEO of Salto, Javier, which you don't really see very often and get that sort of exposure to really the openness that he had. It's awesome. We thought we'd switch gears and hopefully keep that momentum going that we had before. And since it's December and everybody wants to get out of 2020, we thought what we do today is be early and start the conversations of, what are some things that we think could happen. I don't know if we want to call these predictions because that is not necessarily, but really what we think may happen, sort of from the influence of the marketplace and what's going on. So let's start, if we will, let's jump into that. So we'll do it in a way we talked about. I'll state something. You could argue with me, say it is, say it isn't, but we'll kick it off. So here's the first one that I think we were going to see some effects coming into the next year in multifamily. So if you look at the acceleration of e-commerce that's happened since COVID, everyone's working from home, and some of the exposure to relative norms that we believed we had before that have been challenged, like, for instance, the ability to sell and to buy even commercial goods like ours and our industries, right? Being done through e-commerce has been lightly done at best. Like majority of our industry, one-on-one, you're in front of somebody, it's a sales process typical that you've seen. And maybe not the e-commerce part, like of the actual buying, but the discovery end of how people learn about stuff, get information, make selections. And then I even think in the end, personally, that there'll be more e-commerce sales this way. My belief is that's going to happen in multifamily even more, is that the control of the influence of purchasing decisions is going to be impacted now that people have been exposed to the ability to do even more discovery via the internet and not having to have so-and-so come meet in my office. So what are your thoughts on that, Colin?
As far as the discovery piece goes, absolutely. I think you're going to see wider assessments and opportunities to see demonstrations and things of that nature virtually, which then opens up the pool so people can have demonstrations of more products than maybe what they would have had when people were coming into their buildings. I think that is also going to put a greater responsibility on manufacturers and integrators to be prevalent in the digital marketing specific, with very targeted approaches to where we fit in the multifamily space, right? And not just high level product and we've got to get specified in our digital space because of this new research and discovery that I think is going to be driven more in that e-commerce model. I would be the actual purchasing piece, right, of the e-commerce, I think is where it's going to be interesting, because on one hand, I think you're getting requests and demands for more sophisticated solutions, right? Now, that when I say sophisticated, I don't mean at the end level, right? They want it to be as easy on the resident and operator as possible. But in order to deliver that, the setup, the design, the creation, the installation, the implementation, that becomes much more sophisticated, which then puts a challenge on that e-commerce piece, right? There needs to be a little bit more hands-on. On the flip side to that, you're also starting to see more appliance-based solutions that may simplify that e-commerce and drive more of that e-commerce. So I think as it comes to where e-commerce is going to directly affect access control and multifamily is in a combination of discovery and then after the initial sale. More in the support as a service or service as a service or add-on as a service. So you're going to do the discovery, Now we've got to implement it. We've got to design it. We've got to make it work the way that we can deliver the experience that we're telling our residents they're going to get. But then after that, I don't want to have a technician or somebody come in every time I want to make an improvement or make an adjustment and that sort of a thing. So I think that's it, kind of on both ends. You're going to start to see an uptick, but maybe not in the actual purchase element of the initial process.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because like this idea that every time you need to do updates on your computer, you're gonna have Microsoft come out with the truck, and look, it just doesn't happen. Now, yes, there's IT people that do help on that end, but again, I think that's
Yeah.
larger of a sort of a that's where the systems integrator side of this sort of systems hygiene type things come into play versus the need to do it because the way the system's architected and set up means I have to come plug my thing into your computer and I'm the only one that has the software. Yeah, it is. So yeah, so I think we align more discovery and more service. I guess the other part of that too is I'm interested to seeing the impact that as these companies get more relationships with like industry people on our end from a software standpoint, the relationship, like who owns that relationship and what part, what are the expectations there that people have on that? That's super interesting to me. And I mean, I don't know exactly how it's going to go out. I can play games in my head of like, you can start to see integrators that just install and then manufacturers who take over that stuff. You see a blended approach of installers that handle everything. The good news is I think what we're going to see is far more opportunities to have different business models that fit the need from the customer standpoint and also the dealer type that you want to be. And I think it's okay. It's not like a binary, like one's good, one's bad. It's just, no, this is how we do things. And we have the flexibility built in now to have different models.
And I think one of the pieces there that is, I think often overlooked when we talk about this transition from face-to-face selling to e-commerce, right? In an e-commerce, there's still a relationship piece that is human to human and is important, right? I don't think we're ever going to get to this point where it's pure consumer based. I go online and it's just done, right? There still is a human to human element that we need to be cognizant of in building that relationship and make sure that that's all reciprocal on every aspect. It just may be done via a different medium and a different communication path, but we still have to be very cognizant of that relationship that's being built.
Yeah, and that's I totally agree. And that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation because whenever we typically get, we, not me and you, but we being collective industry, we get into these conversations, it goes to like there's a whole camp that's like, no, we're never going to sell online. It's like, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about and what you just said there is the way it gets done changes. And that's why sort of the need to adopt tools or be open with a curiosity to know. And actually, I think those that embrace it more of doing it a little bit different, that makes it a bit easier for people to do discovery, are actually going to benefit more in the end because you'll have those things in place versus people that are going to play catch up a while ago, which leads me to my next one. And I'm interested on this because, and maybe I'm just think there's too many, but it could be the case. I believe next year, and what's happened this past year, is we've had an influx of people focused on the multifamily and smart apartment space that I really believe it's going to be hard for new entrants to come in. And I think what's going to happen is there'll be a focus. People will start to gravitate to other marketplaces that will start to garner more attention, if you would, from maybe the mainstream conversation. I think the market's still going to be super strong in the rest of it. But I do believe we're deep into a culling of the herd in a lot of ways of the companies and people that are going to really go after this market, kind of like we saw in the hospitality space, which I know Salto and you all have a good foot in, to where that is really a market where there's a handful of people that play in that do bulk of the business, which I really think those that were early in the multifamily move, if you would, or have been there, or are new that came in and filled space, and those some legacy ones that didn't move enough that are going to fall off, that I really feel like we're hitting that point with multifamily where majority of the people that are going to win at this space are in this space. I don't know. What are your thoughts? And I mean, I recognize you're in it, and it's sort of like, yeah, everyone else get out. But but still, like I just it feels like it.
So I think there's two pieces that I think are playing on that a little bit, and I would hate to say that there's not going to be new entrants or there's not room for new entrants, because I do think that there are still some unique demands and unique opportunities to fulfill the resident experience demands and simplify the lives and separate one building from another building. I think the challenge is going to come in two places. One is it's a lot easier for new entrants to come in when decisions are being made in what I would call a project by project level decision, right? Where a building's going up at 800, Central Avenue in Chicago, and the decision for what's going to go into that property is made at 800 Central in Chicago. Because then if there's a new manufacturer or somebody who's got a new solution can sell and pitch and win that project, they get their opportunity. But we're starting to see some of those decisions now get pulled up into more of portfolio level decisions, so that there's uniformity across entire portfolios of buildings. And that is making it much more difficult for a new entrant to kind of get to that level. And so from that standpoint, I think there's some interesting pieces there. And then the second piece to that is the integration piece, right? So if in order to deliver this resident experience, you need 4 or 5 different players who are all working together, if there's somebody new coming in with this new whiz bang piece, but it doesn't work with the other 3 platforms that incorporate into building that experience, they're not going to get that opportunity. So from that standpoint, I do think we're almost to that maturity, I would say. I don't think we're quite there. I think that we will still see some new entrants, but not what we saw 2 or 3 or 4 years ago when that ecosystem was just starting to develop, and smart devices and electronic locks and access control on unit doors was in its infancy. You could see people getting into the game and new, but I do agree with you that we're almost to that maturity as it relates to people aren't going to spend their new efforts are going to go to a different place. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're getting close.
Yeah, I like that idea. That so influx of newness, a shedding of some of the oldness, if you would, and maturing of people that were existing there to where we're getting to that point of that maturity model that makes it a bit harder for all of that to all newness to come in. But like you said, it's still an opportunity for innovation and the rest. I mean, there's plenty of marketplaces. Like, it reminds me of the lighting control industry and some of the other areas where we saw some of that stuff. University campuses I think it's seen that model like 3 times, and we're going through now one with it again on that, also with mobile happening there, and we're seeing it in it's actually probably going to be interesting because there's probably going to be that same cycle again that's going to happen in the hospitality space, and we'll see it again. There'll be another door that will open in the multifamily, but we're definitely more on that. I would say the downswing, which is but a positive maturing. So that's great. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it may tie into one of your next pieces that I know you've talked about from time to time, is the kind of the wellness idea, right? And I think one of the pieces where we're maybe at that maturity level, but we could start a new upswing is not just in the access control and multifamily that we're talking about here, but in the security industry as a whole. We've often referred to, safety and security, but oftentimes that safety was pure life safety. And it was basically fire or guy walking in with here to do ill harm. Right.
Yep.
But now we're going to start to see the concept of safety become mental health safety, biological safety and virus safety. And so the connotation of safety is going to start to dictate maybe some new opportunities also, right? As we get away from just, did the door unlock when the fire alarm sound, and did we lock it down when there was a potential threat outside of our building?
Yep. No. So that's the next trend that I thought was going to happen, is that the introduction of wellness and how you dictated it and said it well on this idea of how your product helps in the wellness, whether that's, also being able to, if they use you as a platform, are you able to express other data points throughout, like, last time it was cleaned and things like that, right? To help bring a level of trust to people. And then it automates whether the door can lock or unlock if it hasn't been, that type of stuff, right? So that is one. The other part of it, I do believe, is sort of the wellness of the brand that people partner with. Whether it's social issues like diversity and inclusion, or it's how you treat their cousin, like, I do think as people build relationships, they ask, like, how's everything going with the company and this and that, right? They want to know the sustainability side of things like that, because people want to buy from things that they are proud of. They don't want, to buy the Darth Vader of products where where it just knows it's putting off bad exhaust constantly. They want to feel good about the approaches. So that taking a look at, on the one end, the buyer side, asking the right questions to be able to understand if that fits your culture, but then also on the other side, being able to communicate those things without it being clunky, where it's like, yeah, we take wellness in two ways: wellness of the product and what it can deliver, and then wellness of how our company is as an entity. A good. I recently had a guy come on. His last name Grady. First name is Grady. Grady Crosby from Johnson Controls, and he talked about being good corporate citizens, which I thought was a great way of framing what that was, like public affairs on that end. And I do think that horse is going to be ridden a bit through multifamily coming up, because it's going to matter in buying decisions.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of an interesting tie-in and offset, right? A little bit of that e-commerce demand and that discovery demand, right? Because if they're going online and doing all of that discovery, but we also have this desire to make sure we're doing business with good people and the right people and all of that sort of stuff, there comes a point where you can't just get that through an online discovery, right? That's where some of that relationship and communication needs to come in. And so it's a balancing act of getting in front and showcasing what we're doing in global citizenship and wellness and that sort of a thing. But then where does that cross to that relationship, right? And taking the word and the message into action and delivery. And so I think that is something that you see today. You sometimes see organizations showcasing it, but then not delivering. And then you see other places where you wouldn't know it at all, but people are going to this level and they're relying on referrals and all of that sort of a thing. And well, that's a noble piece. And I would much rather be on that side of the equation. There comes to a point where if you're not in today's world, if you're not elevating your position and showcasing that, you're not going to have the opportunity to deliver in that manner. And so how do you balance those two things, I think, is going to be very important.
Absolutely. Well said. So we'll leave it at those three. In the newsletter going out, we'll actually have some as well that lead up to this presentation. So more to come on some of the trends and things that we believe are going to be impacting the business in 2021. Like everybody else, I think we're all ready for that to come in and happen. So as always, appreciate the time, Colin. Appreciate the conversation, and look forward to seeing you again next week.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Take care.